Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Deep Focus Show. I'm Clayton.
I'm Aiden.
And I'm Tavi.
And this week is Ari Aster. He is a master of art house cinematic horror, courtesy of A24. And yeah, we have a very special guest. Do you want to introduce yourself?
My name's Tom. Hello. I wouldn't call myself special, but I'm definitely a guest, so I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Okay. So, you guys, what is everybody's familiarity with Ari Aster? What do y'all think of him in general?
I hadn't seen either of these, so it was new for me. I'd obviously heard of him. You know, he's kind of getting a lot of hype nowadays, but I kind of vaguely knew more Midsommar. I kind of knew what that was about just because of like exposure to it, but not really that much knowledge of either of these.
Yeah, I'm a big Ari Aster fan. I think he is quite special in the sense of the level of professionalism coming from his first two films. Usually, to spoil my takes on this, usually with the first few films from a director, there's some cracks in there that you can pick up. But for it's not really like anything I've seen coming out with two films as good as these to start your career. So I'm excited to talk about it. I've seen both of these films a lot, so it's gonna be a fun discussion.
I agree. I've seen both of these films twice now, and the first time I saw Hereditary, I was kind of in a dark place, like emotionally, so probably didn't help my condition at the time. But Midsommar, I was leaning in a much better place, and much like the theme of the movie, it didn't affect my mental stability at all at the time. So, but yeah, Ari Aster, I like him, and it was great to re-explore these movies. Tavi, what about you?
Yeah, so Ari was a new director for me, so I haven't seen either one of these, and I don't know. I just perhaps because I'm not a huge horror guy, like it's not a. I guess I can't really spoil my takes yet, but I'm guessing I'm not the biggest fan of Ari, but I think he's a pretty cool and definitely he does a lot of well-made stuff. So I was kind of excited as well.
Can I ask you, Tavi, what your favorite horror film is? Since you said you're not a horror guy.
Well, that's a thinker. Like perhaps it's The Shining. Like I can't even think too many at the moment. I liked the Suspiria a lot, the Argento film. But
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, that's
Alien. That's horror, right? That
Yeah,
would have to be.
that's
Yeah.
so. This
yeah,
is
Alien.
kind of a new brand of horror, and I really can't pinpoint the origins of it. I think it probably the earliest memory of art house horror that I can really think of, aside from The Shining, which I guess probably inspired a lot of these brands of horror. This A24 esque make you think kind of horror brand, but the earliest I can think of is probably the Babadook. Yeah, A24 has a huge cult following. A lot of people can compare it to the cult following that the MCU has, but I don't know. What do you guys think of that?
I don't know if it's like the MCU. I mean, most people who like, I feel like that's doing a disservice to A24. Like, I think most A24 fans, even though like I haven't seen that many of their movies, I'm not like their hugest fanboy or whatever, but like I think they generally care about movies. I feel like Marvel fans just want to see like Captain America punch Thor 70 times and watch an explosion. Like I don't think they're exactly comparable.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of an interesting comparison to draw because I feel like at the start maybe when A24 was first becoming popular, I think that would be kind of a crazy comparison to make. But I think now it's sort of a name within people who love film. I think people there's like a distinct tone and style and level of experimentation that comes with A24 films, which I think is very interesting. So I think, yeah, it's kind of an interesting comparison to draw. I think I'm kind of with Aiden in the sense that it kind of comes from a more artistic place than maybe some of these big blockbusters. But there's definitely like a uniform style and tone, I would say, to a lot of A24 films, despite them having unique visions within each film.
I mean, they did just release Everything Everywhere all at once.
That's
A
true.
multiverse film.
That's going to be in the MCU. No, that would be quite an event, wouldn't it?
Yep. I guess before we talk about Hereditary, Ari Aster, he did do some short films before this. I'm not quite as familiar. Tom, you seem to probably know most about this. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh wow, put me on the spot. Okay.
Sorry.
There's so he made, I think the two short films he's most known for are well, one of them would be Munchausen, which is kind of an interesting idea. I haven't seen it in a while. It's kind of one of those things. It's kind of like a short film where it's like you can see the sort of patterns. I think you were talking about art house horror. I think you could even genre these two films as domestic horror, because of how, you know, the first film sort of focuses on conflict within the family, and then the second film within a relationship, and that's kind of what his short films explore as well. So Munchausen is kind of about a mother who can't really deal with her son going to college, and without spoiling it, I think it's probably worth a watch. It's only 17 minutes. It's on YouTube, and she kind of does some things that are kind of questionable. And then there's The Strange Thing About the Johnsons, which I think is a bit more well known, which is kind of an interesting, really messed up short film, which I don't really want to reveal too much about. But yeah, I think there was a lot of buzz going into his debut film. Yeah, a lot of the same kind of themes and ideas are explored in his features that were explored in his shorts. So it's kind of interesting to go back and watch them.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but he did kind of have a draft for Hereditary at first, but changed up the script. I don't know if that's...
I don't know. That's news to me if that is true.
So let's figure out. Okay, who wants to kick us off?
I
go-
can if no one wants to.
Yeah, Aiden, you go first since you were last time, and then I guess I'll go second, then Tom, and then Bobby. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
So okay, his debut film, Hereditary. You know, I was kind of, you know, my first impression. You know, I like a lot of what the film is going for. I think the performances are really good, and I like kind of that from the very beginning. It's clear that he has like a unified style and vision, like for the project. I think I kind of do have a problem with the movie though, which is that like I don't really like the ending very much. Like I think it's a structural problem for me, because it feels like the main conflict of the film for the first 90% is like the conflict within the family, and there's obviously supernatural forces exacerbating it and making it worse, but it feels like the main conflict is the family. And then at the end it's like, oh, it was a like a witch, a demon thing, which is like, I don't know. I don't think there's like a through line between what the film is mostly about and the ending. Like maybe if you were to stretch it, you could say that it's you know, it's kind of because the mother figure, the mother of the Toni Collette character, was kind of a malignant influence within the house, so it's kind of like the supernatural version of that. But I don't really buy that tonally. Like I don't think it really sticks the landing that well. But that being said, I think there's a lot of the film that I really like, and there's a lot to dig into there, and it's very clear he has a real skill from the first frame. Even if I think some of the writing is a little, I don't know if I'm on board with it. But yeah, I won't reveal my rating, but yeah, that's kind of my general thoughts on the film. But I'm glad I watched it. I'll probably watch it again.
Yeah, so one thing, we will be talking about both these films in chronological order before we end up rating them and ranking them, just so everyone knows. All right,
Okay.
So I guess I'm next. Yeah, Hereditary, it's his debut film, released in 2018. I think it's pretty fantastic. I read that initially Ari Aster, he wanted to make a film about grief. And one of the things I like about this film is that you really don't know if it's a supernatural movie at first, but things eventually become clear and the curtains and layers are slowly but surely pulling over. I think the ending is kind of like a mask of genre. Its genre is kind of presented as a limitation on the story that Ari Aster truly wanted to tell. And in my opinion, I think that limitation can provide a little bit more depth. I know, Aiden, you said you have some conflicts with that aspect, but to me, I kind of think of it almost like the game Escape Room. You know, you're locked in a small room, but the clues can be full of life and endless depth to provide the keys and answer. So you're just limited, much like the supernatural element is at first. So I guess I want to say that the supernatural element is like a MacGuffin, but the more I think about it, it's really the opposite. I think the realistic elements in this film are the true MacGuffins. You know, the exploration about grief and everything. Think about it. The cult stuff is intentionally overtly explained throughout the film. So like all the answers to what this film is about are there. It just at that last moment, at that last ending where she's like, "You are Payman." That's when you realize, oh shit, this is the type of movie that I just watched. I think it's the layers underneath that deserve kind of its own discussion. You know, the idea that trauma can be passed down between generations and become hereditary. I like how this film is designed from, you know, like the production to give the film an outside looking in perspective. There's an idea that someone, maybe something higher, is always lurking in the shadows watching your every move. I think if the Oscars were cooler, Toni Collette definitely would have won for this performance, but they're not as cool. This movie is full of pain, grief, and death lurking in the shadows, with the supernatural element being the forefront. However, on the other hand, the next movie, which we'll talk about later, is sort of like the yang to this film's yin. So there's a little bit of connective tissue to that, and we'll discuss that later on. But yeah, 5 stars for both of these films. I just don't know where I'm going to place them yet. We'll see.
Yeah, I like what you were saying about the film there with the sort of the feeling of being watched. I love the opening shot of this film, and obviously Midsommar as well. Midsommar even has a very distinct opening too. But Hereditary is kind of like, you know, you suddenly zoom in on this dollhouse and it's kind of creepy, and it sort of immediately makes you feel uneasy because you're not exactly sure what you're looking at, and then you zoom in like, okay, now this is actually like the house, and then you think about it more, maybe on rewatch, it's kind of like the characters in that house are not really in control of what is about to go down. It's almost as if there's like you said, a greater force that could be controlling them, which is kind of cool. Overall, yeah, the film I think is fantastic. I think it balances the drama and the horror elements really well. I think that I've watched it like 4 times now. And every time I pick up on different things. There's like the symbols that you get throughout the film, obviously. Spoilers, when the big character death happens partway through the film, there's like a lingering shot on that pole, and there's a symbol on it, and that symbol can be traced throughout the film. The book, obviously, in the house, and I think Ari Aster is really good at planting those seeds. And I think both of these films, the first time I watched them, the ending was, I don't want to say not satisfying, but it wasn't an immediate ending for me, and having rewatched them a few times, I kind of appreciated them a bit more. You mentioned the performances: Toni Collette, Anne Dowd, Gabriel Byrne, Alex Wolff, all just knock it out the park. And yeah, there's the whole idea of the Payman concept that Aidan was saying he didn't love about the ending that gets brought up towards the end. I think it's done quite well because, again, on rewatch, it kind of clicks a bit more. The idea that there needs to be a male host, which explains the deaths of these female characters in the family, starting with the grandmother, which is kind of what sets in motion the events of the film. And I don't think you get that family drama without that initial sort of supernatural element, which is cool. And yeah, the last thing I want to say is that I don't know about you guys, but if you'd seen the marketing for this film, but it's kind of implied from the marketing that is it Charlie, that the daughter's name,
Yes.
Is the supernatural element, because she's, it sort of frames like, oh, look at this creepy kid. So like when I
Right.
first watched it, I was like, okay, what's gonna happen? And then what happens. I was like, oh, interesting. That's not what I was expecting. So he's kind of really good at keeping you on your toes for the whole film, and creating an experience that is wholly unpredictable. And it's really well shot, great themes, great performances, great script. It's scary. I mean, I don't know what else you could want in a horror film. So I love Hereditary, and I have since I first watched it.
I really loved your description about it, Tom. It's
Thank you.
hard to follow that up, but yeah, I already told that I'm not a huge horror guy, but I guess if I would have to watch a horror, I kind of like more psychological stuff than like jump scare after jump scare, which basically is this film, Hereditary, and it's this film feels a little like I don't know the exact, but like art horror, and it's the whole. I think the whole cast had really great performances. I enjoyed the Gabriel Burns character. I think I knew him from like the Usual Suspects and Miller's Crossing, so on, and I think he was great. But the standout performance was Toni Collette, and I just think she was really paranoid and depressed and anxious and scary, and honestly sometimes a little mean as well. And I loved the surprises we got. It really didn't go the way I was planning sometimes, and I guess I have a few questions that I still am really not sure why did it happen. Perhaps I can ask them for you guys. But yeah, it was just a very bleak film, and I guess my biggest drawback was also the ending. I honestly thought it would have preferred the ending if it just went like Peter jumped out from the window and it would have ended just there. But I don't know. I just think that seeing the cult stuff was a little unnecessary for me, and like I thought if we hadn't known what happened to Peter that moment, it would have been a better ending for me. But
Yeah, I think there's quite a few moments in the film. If I was going to sort of say criticisms about it, I think your comments on the ending, all you and Aiden's, are fair. I think my issue with it is not what it is. I think that choice works, and like I said, rewatching it, you can go through the film and see all these hints towards the cult aspect. I think it's just they spell it out a little bit too much, and it's kind of like, hey, this is exactly what's happening, and the rest of the film, like you said, there's moments in the film where you're like, what? Like, why did that happen? And even like I've watched it so many times now, and I still have that aspect, but it doesn't bother me because it's still captivating and scary and all these things. But yeah, I think the ending is a little bit too like neat. It's a bit too like, okay, we have to explain everything so that they get it, and then it ends.
I had a drawback on the ending myself when I first watched it. Something about watching these two movies, Hereditary and Midsommar, back to back, and then I don't know. I feel like it really they really complement each other really quite well, and it gave me a lot more appreciation for Hereditary, like quite a lot, to the point where I'm like torn between these two movies. I'm not even going to announce an official ranking until after we're done here. They're just so complimentary.
Yeah, I still like the one thing also that I was really questioning is this is a little spoiler, but it's the death of the why did the father burn? Like I didn't understand because he didn't throw the book in the fire and he didn't even touch the book last. So was there something that I missed, or like why didn't the person who threw the book in the fire burned? So
Yeah, I wasn't sure exactly why that happened, but I kind of was okay with it because it felt like, in terms of story, it kind of worked since he
It
was
really
one of
propels everything forward
well, he was like kind of
from
like
that
the
moment.
voice of reason in a sense against the crazy supernatural stuff. So it was like removing him was like, in a plot sense, I get it, and I think it's handled very well. It's one of those things that I think is probably not that good from like a writing perspective, but in terms of execution, I think it's pretty good.
So Gabriel Byrne's performance is really understated, I think. Have you guys seen the movie Mass? It also has Andau. There
No.
is a character on there that I kind of that kind of reminds me of Gabriel Byrne's character in the sense that they're both like you could call them useless, but they're and even quite hated. Because to be honest, whenever I first watched Hereditary, I hated Gabriel Byrne, like his character, not the
Why?
actor.
Why?
I
What did he
just
do wrong?
Yeah, why?
well he
It's kind
wasn't
of confusing.
I didn't like him. I didn't like the way he was he didn't seem supportive at all to the family. Yeah, Tony Collette did go little batshit there.
Yeah, I was going to say
Especially
that's
when
because
she's
they're all insane. That's why he wasn't supportive.
well, yeah, he is a sane character, but he's just I don't know. I don't know. I didn't
Yeah.
like him. He rubbed me the wrong way. Something about it. It's just almost
I get that
toxic.
though. I
The
get that
vibes
though,
were
because
off.
Yeah.
we'll talk about it with
Yeah.
Midsommar, because I had a sort of reaction to a character in that film on my first viewing, which now I'm like, how did I think that? That's insane. Like,
Oh.
but I guess we'll get to that.
Are there any last comments on Hereditary? All in all, I think it's fantastic. I think people either fall into those two camps. They either like the supernatural elements or they don't, or they want more realism. I was into the first camp now, but now I'm in the latter. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not so much that I don't like the supernatural stuff. It's that I don't think there's any connective tissue between the supernatural stuff and the stuff that's just between the family, other than some like surface level things. Like it doesn't feel like they're very thematically connected. It feels like they're two things that are both happening in the film, but there's not much of a through line connecting them.
I have to disagree with that.
yeah,
Here we
That's
go.
fair. That's fair. Yeah.
You wanted some disagreement. Here you go. You got it. You bring on an angry
Yeah.
Welsh guy. But basically, what I would say, like I said when I was talking about the film, is that the inciting incident of the film is the death of the grandmother. Right. That's where we begin.
Mhm.
And you could argue that the only reason that the family unit falls apart is because of this grief and this sort of the matriarch being pulled away from them, and
this
that
grief that is literally quite hereditary. It's trauma passed between generations.
and you could argue that, again, like I was mentioning, the payment concept that was needing a male host and possessing all these people in the family, that they're sort of interlinked, if you get what I'm trying to say, that the trauma that they are going through and the grief that they are going through, which causes them as a family unit to be broken apart and to conflict, is caused by the supernatural element. And in that sense, like, you can't really have one without the other.
Yeah, that's fair, I guess.
I get like thematically they don't fit because it's kind of like a drama and a horror, and it never really overlaps.
Yeah,
It's like
I meant
one
more.
scene's a drama and one scene's a
Yeah.
horror scene.
I didn't mean so much like plot. I meant more like tonally. But yeah, I get that. But yeah,
That makes sense. You're wrong, but you're allowed to be wrong. So
so you want me to get into Midsommar now?
Yeah, go for it.
You guys are gonna hate me for this, but I don't like this movie at all. It's I don't really. It's not my thing. I don't really like what it's going for. I think this type of cult movie has been done so many times. Obviously, he does make it different in terms of adding like personal characters and stuff like that are more fleshed out than the average horror film. But I don't really like the characters. I think the main girl is not very well written. Like, I don't think her character has much depth. She just seems like vaguely dissatisfied. The main guy, her boyfriend, is just like kind of distant. And it's just, I don't think it's a very original premise. Like, compared to Hereditary, which I do think is flawed but has more of its own identity, I just think this is like, it's just a movie that's so many times like, oh, they're going to, oh, they have a friend who's a member of like a commune, and like they go, and then, oh, things look okay on the surface, they have some weird rituals, and then they kill people. Like, it's not like breaking new ground, really. I don't think. I don't get what it's trying to say. I think thematically it's like really muddled. I don't get, like, I don't understand what the takeaway is supposed to be from the film. I think the ending is kind of, I don't really like the ending. No, it's kind of similar to Hereditary in some ways, which is interesting. Maybe if I viewed these two as companion pieces, I would like Midsommar more. But on its own, I just think it's like I don't get what it's trying to say, and I don't like, and it doesn't even feel like the kind of thematically muddled that some movies are, where they seem purposefully so. This one just kind of seems aimless to me. Obviously, you guys are not going to agree with this at all, but I don't really like this movie. So that's
So me and Aiden watched part of this film first, and I remember you commenting, Aiden, that you liked this film so far, and I think that was around after the point where Danny's parents and sister had their little murder suicide thing. But
yeah.
what was your drawback? Like, when was a point of the film that you were like, nope, not for me?
I think the thing is that the thing with the first half of the film, because what happened was we watched the first half of the movie together, and then something came up. I had to leave. It wasn't like I didn't want to watch it. It was like a school emergency I had to do. But like, the thing is with the first part, I really like the style of this film. I like when I think of my favorite parts of the film, I think of the visual and storytelling components. So at first with the film, I was like, okay, this is like a good presentation. I like the way it's kind of showing these ideas. Let's see what else it has. Let's see what this is going for. You know, like what are these aesthetic flourishes in service of? So early on, I did like the film. I liked because more so because there was like the promise of a good payoff, but I don't really think it has a good payoff. So that's why. But I don't. It's not like the worst movie ever. Like,
Well,
I'm not going to give it a terrible grade, but I don't like really like it that much.
damn. Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Womp womp.
I know. Well, I love this film a lot. So kind of like Hereditary. Conversely, Hereditary is about pain, grief, and it's there, but there's a supernatural element to Hereditary, like we were saying. Conversely, this movie though is about life, freedom, and liberation, with realism being in the forefront instead of the supernatural. Although it's not all liberating, like I said, there's a yin yang element to both of these films. And there's some liberation to be found in both films, I think, for Hereditary itself as well. But for different varying degrees. I'll give an example. The cult in Hereditary stems from many supernatural elements of like resurrection and almost reincarnation, you could say. But the cult in Midsommar holds firm to their convictions. There's a stem of realism that clouds the liberating moments. Like there's that scene where the cult members they sacrifice their elders, and there's a word for that, but I'm blanking on that word if anyone knows it. But they sacrifice their elders in order to avoid the pain of growing old, and in that moment it seems liberating. So one of the elders, they fall off a cliff, and they die. And there's a lot of pride felt in that scene. But then the second elder comes along to do the same thing, and he actually, or might have been a she, but anyways, they survive the fall. And there's like screams of pain from the cult members, and rather than self-sacrifice, that elder is then bludgeoned to death by the cult members, which I feel like it shows the very real pitfalls of sticking to your own convictions. It's kind of a different. I mean, they're both cult movies, but this one's, there's a lot to it under the surface. I've actually seen some theories that the cult in Midsommar is a metaphor for fascism and white supremacy. On the surface, the demonic cult in Hereditary seems worse, right? Because it's demonic, but I don't know. Like, why are there symbols of Swedish anti-immigration? Not to mention, what's the deal with the placement on how each of these foreigners are eventually killed off? I don't know. I think it's pretty interesting. I think there's a lot to say about this movie. I think the themes of Hereditary really segues right into the opening aspect of this film when Danny's whole life is upended from the murder-suicide committed by her sister and towards her entire family. But ultimately, this film is a breakup film, and it's about healing. And I don't know. The way I felt about it on first watch, it was something I can't really describe, and I like it a lot. So 5 stars. But yeah,
Nicely done, nicely spoken about. um, so
thank you.
Midsommar. I've kept calling it Midsummer, but just to keep a consistency within this podcast, I'll go Midsommar because that's probably how you're supposed to say it. But I'm a lazy white guy who is not cultured at all. So basically, this film I have a very interesting relationship with because I don't know about you guys, how often you see a film in movie theaters and you remember your first experience, because this was a pretty vivid experience for me. I'd just seen Hereditary, and this film was coming out, and I think I watched it on the opening weekend that it was out in the UK, and I went to go see it, and I remember that opening, not the very opening with the mural and the weird sort of shot of the woods and like the sort of foreshadowing of the film, the actual opening with Danny and like was referred to, the deaths in her family. That was horrible. I was like gripping onto the arms of the chair. I was like sweating, and it was one of the most visceral reactions to a film I've ever had. And then all that traumatic stuff and like the cry that Florence Pugh gives out. I mean, she gives an amazing performance in this film. For me, even tops Toni Collette. I think she's incredible. And the cry she gives out as the camera slowly goes to the window and then the title comes up. I remember thinking, now the title comes up? There's a whole other film after that? Like, I can't do this. This is a lot of heavy stuff to deal with at once. And I remember being very much like, I wasn't ready. And then I watched the rest of the film and I remember thinking, that was good. Too long, probably. There's a lot of good stuff going on in there. And I sort of alluded to it earlier. I remember thinking that Christian, the boyfriend character, I was like, hey, he's not that bad. He's kind of distant, but I don't know if he deserved all that suffering. But then it's when you kind of think about the film more, and again, I don't want to be that guy that's like, oh, you have to rewatch it to understand it, because I feel like people can get quite caught up in that. But every time I rewatch it, I hate that guy more and more. I'm just like, that guy is the worst. He's so emotionally manipulative, and I kind of Aidan sort of made the point about him being distant. That's kind of the point of the film, is that he's not supporting her emotionally. He's really bad for her, and I kind of like what Clay was saying about the film, but I that's not really what I take from it. For me, this is a breakup fantasy. To me, it's like I can almost envision Ari Aster imagining like that he is Danny and that his ex is Christian, right? And it's like being able to have this fantasy where you really stood up to this person who really didn't make you happy anymore. And to me, it kind of it plays out in that sense throughout the film, especially with the ending. But then also you have got the aspects, like you're saying, with the cult, which are really interesting. Another story from that time I saw in the cinema for the first time, there were like a few like older people in the front, and I swear with the scene where the guy gets his head bashed after he fails to die, essentially, like 8 people walked out, just like they had enough
Wow.
at that point.
Yeah.
They were just like,
Damn.
That's one of the most gripping scenes in this movie, I think.
It's horrifying. It's really
yeah.
horrifying. It's like such a, and then you see it like later on. I'm pretty sure it's in a dream sequence or something when it's like reversed, and like it just looks so real. It's horrible. So yeah, that scene's obviously very cool. Again, much like in Hereditary, it's cool to sort of piece things together. I think it's done it a lot more accomplished way. I can sort of see the progression of Aster as a filmmaker in this film, because you have the mural at the beginning, so you have just a straight image that you can look at and trace all these details. There's like the bear, and it's like they're like, oh, there's just a bear there, whatever. And then obviously at the end of the film, you're like, oh, I see. That's why the bear is there. That's screwed up. And I really like the supporting cast in this film. William Jackson Harper, who is in The Good Place. He does a really good job here. Obviously, Will Poulter plays a great arsehole, for lack of a better word. He is just the worst. He plays that role so well, and he's sort of getting a lot more work now, which is cool. Like I mentioned, Florence Pugh. And I think this was really the role which people saw her and were like, "Yeah, she's an A-lister, she's a movie star now," which is cool for this to come from like such a strange film. I do have slight issues with the pacing. I think it does drag on at points. I think a lot of people pointed to the first sort of 40 minutes where they're sort of planning their trip and waiting for them to get to Sweden. I don't mind that. I think that's paced really well because you really get an idea of the characters and their relationships. And I think that's important before you set foot in Sweden, so that then they can sort of react to things, and that kind of works for me. I think for me, it's like there's the scene where she's like gets drugged quite early on in her stay, which is kind of, it's okay. I wouldn't mind losing that scene. And then towards the end, one of my favorite sequences in the whole film is the dance scene. I think that's just incredibly shot. It's done really well. The music is really well done, and the way it's cutting to Christian as well and what he's up to. I do think that actor is really good at acting like he has no idea what's going on, and he's just like completely perplexed by what's happening around him. I think he does that really well. Part of what makes Midsommar so great to me is the fact that it is this horrifying look into this community and the horrible things that they do, basically, that they see as just justified humane acts, and that it's all happening in broad daylight. And that is the shining sun, and that is just the scariest part of this film to me, because it's like there is no escape. It is all happening in the middle of the day. There's like the orgy scene that is really strange, and it's if you do see a scene like that in a film, you'd be like, okay, she's going to run out and it's the middle of the night, but it's like, no, it's bright sunshine. And in the director's cut, there's a couple of scenes that take place during nighttime, which to me kind of ruins the whole. Like, there's like a scene with like a ritual that happens during the night, and then Christian and Danny have a conversation. I like that. I like the dialogue there. It kind of, if that was in the original version, I think more people would have been against Christian, because I feel like it's kind of a debate whether he deserved what he got, but the scene is shot during nighttime, and it's like black sky, and I'm like, that just goes against the entire point and aesthetic of the film. So yeah, I don't think the director's cut is as good, but kind of, again, it might just be a me thing, the fact that that's what really grips me about this film, is that it's all in daylight. But because Hereditary uses a lot of use of like shadow and like creepy dark rooms, whereas Midsommar, it feels like there's no escape, but then you have a scene at nighttime, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's just kind of ruined ruined the vibe of the film, really. But yeah. Sorry, I talked for a long time about that film.
It's a damn good film. I don't know what Aiden's talking about.
I'm talking sense, man. Don't worry.
Okay, Midsommar. So this was like a folk horror, like group of friends traveling to Sweden to see this Midsummer festival with all its rituals and stuff. And I guess if the whole film, if they just would have go to Finland, nothing would have ever happened. So that's a shame.
Of course, yes.
And yeah,
Tavi is from Finland, everyone.
yeah. So this is like a horror film that's like a with plenty of daylight, which I thought was kind of cool. Yeah, I can't really think of like examples of doing that too much. Like, and this is like the previous one, maybe more disturbing than jump scary. I like Aiden said, I like the visuals of it very much. I guess where I had setbacks is it's very odd, obviously, and too long. I think like 2 hours and 20 minutes is like I don't usually need horror to be that long, honestly. Like I probably don't want some comedies to be that long either. Like I don't know why, but I didn't care too much of a lot of these characters, honestly. To me, they felt kind of bland. Like there was some good humor in between those, but there was something missing from their like friendship, and almost felt like they were actors trying to be friends with each other than they would have a more deeper friendship or relationships. But if I would have to nominate the best one acting wise, it would be the lead actress Florence. And even I don't know, is this a little cheat, but even I thought sometimes her emotions felt a little too strong, and like her crying sometimes didn't feel genuine enough. Like maybe a little overdone. Like, but I guess she was consistent with it, so it wasn't too bad. And I kind of like the ending a little bit maybe than the previous one, but it's never a pleasant watch. But yeah, I'm not sure would I. This is a hard to recommend honestly, but I think it has. I think the best I like about it is the visual stuff, and I think Ari is a talented director, but there's always something that I just can't connect with it, or I just think there. I guess the length was a main drawback for me here.
Aiden
So
can
yeah.
breathe a sigh of relief now that Tavi's taken all the
Yeah.
heat from him.
Well, it's a
you-
movie I might change my opinion on. I'm not set in stone.
Well, hopefully you do, because this is. It's got to be up there. It's probably top 5 favorite films of all time of the 2010s, not of all time, but
Bro,
of the
what?
2010s.
No, I don't see that, dude. I don't think I'd ever get it up there, but
Parasite
I mean,
probably
I'm glad
better.
you like it.
I just wanted to I think both of you guys have commented on like how the characters feel quite emotionally reined in, you know, especially Christian. I mean, obviously not Danny. Danny does a lot of loud crying, which yeah, I get that. But it's like, to Tavi's point of them not seeming like friends. I feel like that's kind of the point. I think that I'm blanking on the guy's name. William Jackson Harper's character. The William Jackson
Josh.
Harper's character. Oh, okay, Josh. So his character is like, so he's always got his nose in a book, and he's sort of like the whole conflict between him and Christian. It's like these people's priorities aren't their care for each other than Danny, who is clearly an empathetic and compassionate person, which I kind of think is the interesting thing about the dynamics within this film. And Pelle kind of comes across that way, but then you sort of think he's probably just doing that to manipulate her, and that's probably why she becomes like thinking that it's a good idea to come to Sweden, because he is the only one that really shows any real compassion towards her. So yeah, that's kind of why I think it's an interesting thing. It's not quite like in Hereditary, where you can sense the bond despite them really clashing a lot. It's definitely a more cold film in its relationships.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those things where I think this one especially, Midsommar, I think it's one of those cases where a lot of the things attempted are things that I like in concept more than I like in execution. Like in terms of the characters being more distant and things like that.
Mhm.
But well, another thing I kind of wanted to bring up with this film is like you guys were mentioning the like old people sacrificing themselves scene, and the guy gets like bludgeoned in the face. Honestly, like I've never been a really big fan of explicit gore in movies, just because I feel like any movie with that can make it more scary by not showing it and like leaving it up to the audience's imagination. And I definitely think that was the case here. Like I think just implying that would have been more powerful than just like showing it with like fake blood and him getting all like smashed up and shit. I just
Do you
think
not
it would have been more powerful to just leave it to the audience's imagination.
Do you not think it's such a cool practical effect, though? It's like, it looks so real. It's so visceral.
It's a cool practical effect, but like that doesn't mean I think it's better storytelling. I think the practical effect is cool, but I think the emotion they're trying to tell could have been better told by not showing it. You know, I don't think I think special effects should exist for the story, not on their own for their own sake.
Well, you would like Saw, like the original Saw, not the sequels. Definitely not.
Really?
The sequels.
You think I
Yeah.
would?
Yeah, the original Saw. It's more
They leave a lot up to your interpretation, imagination. Yeah, maybe I would like it.
I just had one last point on Midsommar as well. I don't know if any of you guys have seen The Wicker Man. Very obvious.
The Nicolas Cage version.
No.
Best movie ever made.
I've seen that. Yeah, the Nicolas Cage one, but not the original.
The original. This film is very clearly drawing. It's almost beyond drawing influence. It's like retelling it, which is kind of interesting. And a lot of people point that out and said it was to its detriment. But I've seen The Wicker Man. The Wicker Man's pretty good. It's way ahead of its time. But it doesn't have, I guess Aidan and Tavi would disagree, it doesn't have the emotional core that this film does, of that central relationship and, you know, the sort of the idea of grounding it with this, which is what I think Ari Aster is amazing at doing. Like I said, it's the domestic horror is you know, that's really what separates his films from the rest.
Aster is a better director than his two films have like brought. I feel like he has more to offer than what I've seen, and I'll be looking out for future films he makes.
He's working on this drama next, right, with Joaquin Phoenix. So
yeah,
Disappointment
I'll
Boulevard.
definitely be watching that when that comes out. But yeah,
maybe Tavi will enjoy that one more as well, because being a horror guy.
It's incredibly long. It's 3.5 hours, and he was just commenting on the length of Midsommar. I mean, so
True.
Tavi, you posed an excellent question about like what, and even Tom, what are some other horror films that are in broad daylight? You know, that's as sunshiny and happy as this one, because I can't really think of any.
Even ones that are shot in daylight, they really amp it up in this film because of the location and the weather and the costume design. You know, so I can't really. Yeah, I don't think there is one that really does it to this extent. You know?
Yeah, things are very bright in this movie. I like that stylistic choice.
Yeah. I was just gonna say that I really loved the production design and costume design of the Midsommar, and just but I guess I don't know. I just seeing some of those. There's plenty of like scenes where they just ate something, and I'm not sure. Like, did I really even care about the dance sequence that much?
Oh, I loved it. I
Oh
loved
my
it.
god! Heartbreak live on
Yeah.
YouTube.
I'm sorry. Like.
I think
I
the
guess
dance
I'm.
sequence is just
I'm with you,
so.
Tavi. Don't worry.
It's so enchanting. It's like.
And when
It's
she
like
starts speaking in another language,
Yeah.
like, wow, we're
I don't know.
talking. Ah, it's wow.
And the music choice as well, like I said, to use that traditional sort of folky music works really well for the scene. But yeah.
Any closing remarks on this film before we talk about commonalities?
I mean, we could get into our like rankings, I guess.
My only thought left is that she should have just broken up with him and not burnt him alive. That's my conclusion.
Yeah, I think there's a weird element of like idolizing what the character did because
Well,
like
Yeah.
on a level you should like I think you understand it, but I think it's kind of weird to hold it up as like a super liberating story just given all the ending. Like I get why, it's kind of a weird way to like interpret it and take away that from it.
It almost feels like therapy, that film, is that he was just like getting all of his anger out, which,
Yeah.
that's not gonna be for everyone. So
No, I get that.
I do want to mention the ending of both Hereditary and Midsommar. There's that triangular image of there's that sacrificial hut that Christian and the others are in, and then also the clubhouse outside of their house in Hereditary. They're both triangular, and I don't know what Aster is trying to say with that. Like, what's with that imagery?
it's
I
the
don't know.
Illuminati that did it. That's the
Possibly.
That's the secret. No, I have no idea. Someone with more intelligence should answer that than me.
Yeah, please comment. So yeah, let's get into our ranking, Aiden.
Okay, my ranking is number 2, Midsommar. What I said basically, it's a flawed movie. There's elements that are good and that I like, but overall I don't find the movie that engaging. I probably like don't want to watch it again, except if I wanted to like go in and say, let's really try and see if you can budge your opinion on this. Might rewatch, but probably not. It's a 2.5 out of 5. And then Hereditary, number 1. I think it's better. It's a movie that I also think has problems, mainly structural and kind of tonal, which I laid out before. But I think it's much steadier as like a product and more like I get more enjoyment out of watching it. I still don't think it's perfect, but it's a solid 3.5 out of 5 for me.
You really like those older films, don't you?
Look, it's not intentional. I don't go into movies and say, "Hey, it's new. I hate it." Like,
No, I know. I'm just giving you a hard time.
No, I got you. But yeah, that's my ranking.
I don't know. Okay,
Here it comes. Flip a coin.
It was the pause. It was like I could just hear the cogs turning.
Now do the thing where you flip a coin, and if you're disappointed with the result, you wanted to go the other way.
Yeah.
Ever told you to do that?
I've heard, yeah. And usually that's like the story of my life, but you know what? There is when Hereditary first came out, there was a common, actually Midsommar, whenever it first came out, there was a common opinion that Hereditary was a far superior film. But a lot of people these days are turning around, and I think I'm going to follow that camp. I think these are both 5 stars, but I'm going to put Hereditary second because of just, I think Midsommar is a lot more cohesive. And while I can applaud the genre bending, and you don't really know what you're going to get into until you see the ending of the film for Hereditary, I'm going to put Midsommar first. So Hereditary is number 2, just because of that aspect. Also, yeah, like Tom was saying, Florence Pugh. I love Toni Collette. I think she deserves more recognition, but if I had to pick of the 2 superior leads, it's Florence Pugh. So Midsommar is number 1, Hereditary is number 2, both 5 stars. But if I'm going to rewatch a movie, it's going to be Midsommar. If I had a choice between the watch like Midsommar or Hereditary, I would watch Midsommar. Of course, I would rewatch both of these. And yes, I am of the camp that you do need a rewatch to understand the prestigious nature of what's going on.
Yeah, I didn't mean to call you out like that.
It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, for me, yeah, this is tough. I often give Clay a hard time for his rating system because he likes giving 5 stars like nobody I've ever met in my entire life. But
Thanks for Kubrick. Watch our episode.
I will say that I am also going 5 stars for both, which is, I think I've only got about 40 or 50 films rated 5 stars. So these are up there on my all-time list. And then ranking them, I think I'm also going to go Hereditary at 2, 5 stars. Just fantastic film. It is one of those films where the first time I watched it, it was like a classic that had existed for decades. And it is really just an incredible film and everything that horror should be. But I just have a more personal attachment to Midsommar, which is going to be my number 1. The emotional core of that film. I think I said in the discussion, but that sequence at the start with Danny and the stuff that happens with her sister and her parents, that was probably my favorite short film ever made. If that is, cut out of the film and put out as a short film, because I think it's so terrifying and really gets you to know the character immediately. So I just think Midsommar is a great film with a great lead performance. Again, the camera work, every aspect of it is great. So it's one of my all-time favorites in the genre. So yeah.
I'm glad you bring that up because nobody talks about the importance of that scene at the beginning, and it's really important for the entire events of the.
It's easily my
film.
favorite scene in the whole film. It's my favorite scene in the whole film by far.
Yeah,
I love it. But I also hate it because it's horrible to watch. But you know what I mean. Saying I love a scene like that is kind of, might put me on a list somewhere. I don't know.
Uh-oh.
But anyway.
Yeah, so my ranking number 2 is Midsommar. I'm still not sure about the dance sequences because I did love the dance sequence in like Another Round, the ending for that. So I guess it felt so long, and it's like I've watched 2 hours of this horror film. Like I kind of wanted to end, and then it was just a random Dancing with Stars moment there. I don't know, and like so I'm going, and there's also like a scene with Kai being on a tree. Like okay, and so I'm going 3 out of 5. I think it's a solid film. But my number 1 was easy. It was the Hereditary. I gave it a 4 out of 5. It's a very good film. It just felt more captivating and easier to recommend to people. Even like it felt even more like maybe a little typical horror than Midsommar. And so yeah, I got very good at least.
Nice.
Yeah,
we're all split.
Yeah. Well,
I
I think I'm pretty close to Tavi rating wise, even though mine are a half star under for each. Like both of them are high for their rating, and I could see each of them going up like a half star.
bet Clay's
Yeah.
glad he invited me on now, or else he would have had.
I was about to say that. Yeah, I certainly am.
2 haters on here.
I know. Before we leave, do you guys want to discuss your expectations for Ari Aster's third film?
I'm actually excited to watch it. Despite the criticisms I had of each of these, and especially Midsommar, I mean, it's clear he has a real talent for direction, and I'm excited to see what he can do with what seems like a more unconventional premise than his first two films. So yeah, I'll be interested to watch it.
Would you be interested in joining our show again for that?
Yeah, I mean, no, I'll definitely come on. That's not why. It's just I'm thinking about how excited I am for the film because, I mean, there's the length, there's the fact that he's going into a different genre. Obviously, like you could call either of these films dramas as much as they are horrors, you know. But I think, yeah, it'll be very interesting, and I usually try not to miss a Joaquin Phoenix film because you're going to be in for something, but. If there's anything these two films have taught me is I'm not going to go in with any preconceived ideas of what the film's going to be about because I'll probably be wrong. So
I forget. Did Joker come out the same year as Midsommar?
it did, and it is
Yeah.
a far inferior film. But
No,
that's a story for
Joker
another day.
is way better than Midsommar. I'm sorry, guys.
Oh
That's,
no! Does Aiden live in a society? Oh god!
Joker is like a 5 out of 5.
Ooh. Yeah,
You're-
don't ask me on for Joker, please.
Way better than Midsommar. I'm sorry. I'm just here. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just spitting facts. It's not my fault. Just kidding. But yeah.
Well, everybody, that
Yeah.
is our episode, and I really don't want to end it on that. So, but you know what we are.
You want me to introduce our next one?
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, and I'm going to also introduce our follow up to that. So you introduce our next one, and since our follow up involves Florence Pugh, I might as well introduce that too.
Yeah, so our next episode is probably going to work a little different. We're still doing a director, but it might not be a traditional ranking because we only have one movie to talk about. We're going to do Charles Laughton, the man who directed The Night of the Hunter. I mentioned him on our very first episode. Really excited to talk about it, dig into it. I hope you guys like the movie and we can talk about it. And yeah, hype for that. So we'll see you then.
And our next mini one after that is going to be Greta Gerwig. So Florence Pugh was involved in Little Women. And I'm also excited for that.
Sweet. I'll be tuning in.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for coming on. And yeah, thank you guys. Bye.
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 Bye bye.